Welcome back for the second season of the DDI podcast, where we are continuing our mission to demystify the misconceptions surrounding digital infrastructure. I'm your host, Mark Yields, the Vice President for Schneider Electric's Secure Power Division here in the UK and Ireland. And today I'm delighted to host Amy Young, Sales and Board Director from Custodian Data Centers, who's passionately leading the way for women in tech and is proactively pushing for better pathways for diversity in both the technology and data center industries. And today we're going to talk about the skills crisis, how we can make the tech sector and data centers seem like a more fulfilling and interesting career path, and ultimately, what can we do to encourage a more diverse talent pool into the industry? So, Amy, welcome and thanks for joining me on the pod.
No, thank you for having me. Pleasure.
Well, great stuff. Let's get straight into this then. So, what about if you help our listeners, help them understand your personal journey into the tech sector? How on earth did you become involved in data centers?
Isn't that the question we all ask ourselves?
Very much so. Very much so, yeah.
Yeah, so my background, when I started out my career, I actually, for all my sins, completed a decade in the recruitment sector, ending up in executive search and headhunting within the pharmaceutical field. So very, very different. I basically lost my passion for recruitment and was seeking a different industry sector that I could utilize my skill set. An opportunity came up with a company called CHS Networks, who are an MSP provider, who were looking for somebody to kickstart their sales and marketing arm. So MSPs, typically, it was covering anything from subscription licensing through to hardware, turnkey solutions, the whole caboodle. So I was completely thrown in at the deep end. It was one of the steepest learning curves for tech that you can have because they cover such a scope and a breadth, but what an amazing experience. In turn, we joined forces with Custodian and we're actually promoting co-location. And I think tech is a little bit like a real bug. It's like an implanted seed that once you get your teeth stuck into it, the opportunities and the verticals are endless. Custodian approached me and asked if I was interested in joining them on their growth journey. And we're now 5 years on and the rest is history, so to speak.
Wow. Amy, it doesn't cease to amaze me whenever I talk to guests on this show, the different pathways that people kind of start, and partially finish on is quite interesting, I have to say. Many of us have taken many different lefts and rights and a couple of forward steps along the way, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think particularly in the modern day that we're in now, there is no workplace where tech isn't intrinsically involved in some shape or form. And it obviously is continually evolving. But yeah, definitely. I am yet to meet somebody who said, when I left school, all I wanted to do was work in colo. But hey, I'd like to be proven wrong. That would be great.
Well, let's find that person. Could be our seek to stardom. So let's move ourselves on a little bit then. So because we're going to talk about talent today and how do we, the landscape is changing a little bit. And when we look at, say, the World Economic Forum, which predicts that the world is going to create another, what did they say, 150 million new technology roles over the next 5 years. And 77% of all jobs by that point will need an element, an aspect, or a large proportion of digital skills. Additionally, of course, that was backed up by a survey by Capgemini and LinkedIn, who found that half of respondents believe the digital divide is widening. Of course, this is going to cause us a problem. And of that, 54% of companies have lost competitive advantage due to those shortages. Let's talk about the skills crisis. I mean, you look at those, just a couple of stats there, don't you? But how do you think we, in our sector can do more to encourage people to come into the tech industry?
Do you know what? It's probably one of the most talked about subjects is skill shortage within our industry sector, but particularly within my client base as well. As so many people are struggling to attract the right talent or boost those skill gaps. first and foremost, I do think we should celebrate that as an industry, we are creating such a volume of workplace opportunities and jobs and everything out there, because it's something, you know, all of us want that economy to start thriving, and we want to be bolstering that. So that statistic is a great one and definitely one we should celebrate. But yes, there is the negative tinge on it in the fact that there is gaps. It's undoubtable. For me, we need to align ourselves with what other sectors have done. If you take sport, for example, grassroots, we need to go back to that grassroots, and it comes back to education. Education breeds awareness. STEM as a overarching heading is lacking in our primary and secondary education hugely. And it's having a knock-on impact because our younger generations are not getting the exposure to understand and be educated in those sectors, but also to ignite an interest and everything in the first instance. I also think that as an opportunity, we as industry leaders and people representing our industry should really be looking to collaborate more with those education establishments as well. I know there's a huge surge on apprenticeships and everything, which is a phenomenal thing, but I almost think that's a little bit too late. We need to be going in earlier. When you have candidates coming forward for an apprenticeship, they've already got a passion or an interest for that sector. So we need to be doing more to propel more people to take, whether it's science, technology, you know, it's not just tech. There's shortages in engineering and everything as well. So we need to be looking at that. The other thing with that volume of jobs that are going to be created, and within Colo, we see this huge drive and surge of direction for technical roadmap. A lot of companies fall foul of actual workforce development as well, and don't necessarily look at how they can promote from within, upskill the staff that have got that industry knowledge already and develop them. And that in turn, looking at the stats, the amount of churn that companies face as well, because not always the grass is greener, but there are other opportunities. There are companies offering further personal development, career development and everything. And then you've got a company crying out because they've got all of these gaps that they're looking to fill. Sadly, there is no quick fix. There is no magic formula. But for me, the key points are that workforce development, to summarize my last point, getting in at grassroots level, that early education and enlightenment as to what those skills can offer you and what they can bring to you later in life as well, but really to ignite a passion. And I really think that industries like ours should be collaborating more with those education establishments. We're passionate about it. And I love this industry sector. I love tech and what it can bring and all the good it can do. And it's important that that's shared in an early stage.
Fantastic. Yeah, I was like listening to myself in the mirror at that point. So, so I don't know if you can listen into a mirror, but anyway, if you could, that's exactly what that sounded like. And I think, I think you're right. There's an ecosystem play. There is STEM. Is it wholly exciting for everyone? Jury's probably out on that a little bit. I'm really happy to see that STEM is now STEAM. So we're now talking about the arts, and that'll open up the pathway to a number of other people. The bit I really liked what you said there was about celebrating our industry, because it's always super easy to get yourself into a whole spiral of doom. Yeah. Actually, the industry's got a lot to be proud about, I think. So we should showcase and promote. So showcasing and promoting, and let's talk about that, because there are always barriers. But what do you think is the biggest barrier for entry into our sector? Maybe you've covered a bit of that off, and can we solve it?
I think everything's solvable. I think if you have a unified front, I believe everything and everybody can do a little bit to help a greater cause. No one individual is going to solve it overnight. And I champion anybody who's on that cause and that route plan in order to do it. I think if we go back, education is severely lacking. 100%. It's severely lacking. I think that there's a lack of relatable role models in the industry as well for those younger generations that are coming through. We need to start to adapt to how they access information, how they access learning. We ourselves, we have a very successful YouTube channel. And although from a business perspective, it doesn't see sort of ROI, so to speak, in terms of an education platform, it gains amazing traction because we open the door so people can actually see what is a data center, what actually goes on behind the scenes, that element of transparency. And I also, in some element of contradiction to what I've said, there's a lack of opportunity for those with a passion for the sector that are overridden because they may not tick the education box. And so it may be that they're not degree level. But for us, our NOC team are built on a team that has true inward passion for everything tech. They all have home lab environments. They live it, they breathe it, they're gamers and everything. And that makes them the best people for that job. Are they all degree candidates? No. But what difference does it make? They're the right person for the role. We can train, we can teach, we can encourage that and that career development and everything for them. And lastly, it's the perception of our industry. I know you touched on it before, but it can be off-putting from an outward perspective. If somebody's looking in and possibly investigating that, maybe they've seen a role or an opportunity that's available and they look into the data center industry. It's not always the best in terms of how it's portrayed. For me, can it be solved? Yes, but you need everybody pulling in that same direction.
Yeah, I think the message is loud and clear. The ecosystem is the solving agent here. In 2023, the Uptime Institute published a report, didn't they, which found that 20% of respondents had no women within their design, build, or operations team. And a further 22% said that women make up only 1 to 4% of their workforce. I mean, wow. And let's be right, my experience and my studying tells me that, diverse thinking, women in particular, bring a unique perspective and a set of skills to a business from entry level to right across the piece, right up to senior leadership. And I believe it's vital we create opportunities, as you were saying earlier, grassroots, right to the top of the tree. And in an industry that is, let's be right, let's call it out for what it is, that is male dominated, like the data center industry. What can we do you think, to better engage women in tech and build a more diverse workforce, notwithstanding the point that we need some male advocates as part of this solving group?
You need male advocates that hit all the boxes that you said. You need male advocates that are an advocate for diversity in the workplace, first and foremost. The underrepresentation of women is one of my biggest passions and challenges to try and resolve. And there are some phenomenal women in the tech sector, absolutely phenomenal. Do they get the press and the acknowledgement and the recognition as much as our male counterparts? No, in all honesty. And that's comes back to sort of bias, social stereotype and everything. I know I'm unique in my position to be at sort of board level within a data center industry. Our board is actually 50-50, 2 males, 2 females. I know, it's great, right? But I can truly say I work for an amazing, inclusive company, be it culturally, every mix that you could imagine. The figures don't lie. And there are also some awful reports that I'm reading with regards to companies falsifying information to try and promote that they do have a more inclusive workforce. They're creating personas of women just so that they look as though there's been a woman's contribution into things. And the saddest thing is that there are so many women out there fighting for that cause, doing amazing things in our sector. My daughter is 15 and I would love to say that she is destined to work in tech. Absolutely not. That is not her passion. That is not her driver. It doesn't float her boat. However, the interesting thing for me is, one, we need to realize that we shouldn't be pushing women or promoting or placing women in job roles just to tick a quota and just to make up a metric and make our policies and our headcount and everything look great to the outside world. For me, it's about more, you need to have the right people in the roles. You need to be creating a workplace culture that attracts everyone and is inclusive to everyone from every walk of life, every background, be that education, their upbringing. So that inclusive environment. And by doing so, I do see a shift, genuinely. Is it happening quick enough for me? No, but then I'm predominantly impatient, so nothing. I want to click my fingers and it's done. But we have a phenomenal platform and opportunity to engage. And as I've said before, if we can just encourage a handful of females that have phenomenal skill sets that could easily transfer to our industry, then I would just implore and encourage those recruiting to not ask questions like I've been asked in an interview, which is, how will you cope with working in a male-orientated environment? How will you deal with being the only woman in the room? Encourage them, engage with them. I want them to be proud to be stood up to be the only woman in that room. And then when they come back again, I want to see 5 more. That's the way that we should be working. And it's not that they're there because they're female. They're there because they have a right to be there. They have the right skill set and they bring what should be to the table.
Oh, fascinating comments these are, because the really interesting piece on me around this is the environment and that inclusivity within the environment. I think you just touched on it on your last comment there, actually, when you're asked questions that are, there's significantly negative connotation to that type and style of question. And it's not exactly embracing with angel wings and bringing people into the industry, is it? Those kind of questions are quite, more than disruptive, I would say. I think the other point to note, and we should probably say this as we're recording this in National Apprentice Week, is that we have a great opportunity. I think you touched on this really early on, thinking about how do we get apprentices. What role can apprentices play? I'm an apprentice myself. I have to put that one out there nice and early. So I can see, I think, the complementary piece of apprentices married alongside grads and bring a whole different sphere and 2 very different dynamics with those 2 groups as well. I'm not saying it's the solving agent, but it might be one of the ingredients in the cake to help us start to think about how we could solve this, for sure.
Definitely.
So while we're talking about younger careers here, then, when you reflect on your career and you look back and you go, what would I have told myself, number one, but what would you offer to maybe younger women just beginning that kind of professional journey? So what would you tell that person? And then what would you tell the industry to try and forge the gap closer together? How would you approach that?
Isn't it great? Hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it?
Amazing.
For anybody starting, there are some generics that I would cover off for anybody starting out in any form of professional career, be that from a school leaver, apprenticeship, and so on. You need to build your skills. So you have to be prepared to invest that time in that learning. And that's not always going to come from your employer. It could come from your team around you. It could come from just engrossing yourself in that subject matter, whether that's watching a YouTube video, whether that, we have so many amazing resources at our fingertips now that you can lean into, and building your skills and your knowledge is one of your superpowers in short. Your network is really important. I'm not talking about network in terms of IP transit and elements like that. I'm talking about connecting with professionals within the field and scope that you'd like to work within. LinkedIn is an absolutely amazing resource. It's not just a recruiter's paradise. There are so many phenomenal people. There are groups and everything that you can join. There's some amazing ones for the data center sector in particular. And there are opinion-based learning. There's just fountains of knowledge that you can lean into. So I would say connect with, even if it's people that you aspire to be like, research, review, where have they come from, where are they going, and connect in with them, because the world is about networking. That is how we learn. That's how we get on in life. That's how career development comes from. So build up that professional network. And that doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual thing, but it's one that I would encourage anybody to do. And unfortunately, I'm old enough to say LinkedIn wasn't a thing when I started out. So that is one of those amazing, amazing tools. I would also suggest for joining in an early stage to seek a form of mentor. Mentors can come in many shapes and forms. They don't necessarily have to even be within your organization, but a mentor can provide so much guidance, so much support, and really help you navigate your way through. And if I was to give advice to myself back then, I would say embrace the challenges that you face, be open to them, don't be intimidated by it, and just power through. And I would also say to all the females, support one another and be a great advocate for women in that industry sector that you're in.
Very good advice. Very good advice, because, when I think about some of the discussions that I have when I'm mentoring, maybe even early talents now, all of those topics come up. It's like, how do you build your network? Have you got a mentor at the very least? Have you got a view on what you think your career path might look like? Because, dreaming is perfectly acceptable. I do like the addition, actually, of the self-learn piece. Not everything is, we don't dish everything up to you. Sometimes it's a case of go find it. And actually, I believe the younger gen have a much better perspective on this. If they need to find something out, they're into the tech before I've even thought about picking up my phone. So actually, it's almost native, isn't it, to their behavior? So Amy, last question. Yeah. Throughout our series here, we do a little bit of future gazing, into the crystal ball. Just talk to us about, in your opinion, what's the next disruptive force you see in tech?
Wow, isn't that a crystal ball question? I actually see that there's going to be an advancement in a lot of things that we're talking about, and particularly to the tail end of 2023. So for me, efficiency, flexibility, scalability are going to be up there. Sustainability, I think, is going to come to the forefront. I think for me, sustainability took a bit of a nosedive during COVID because everyone was just trying to function as businesses. But whether that's how we offset certain waste products within the sector, so heat being one of them, seeing some amazing projects coming through of how that's being repurposed, be that for community building. I also do think on the sort of the ECG title, I think because of the growth needed within our sector, I think we're going to be seeing a lot of green builds. So I think people are going to be really, really starting to implement that energy, that green overview right from ground up, or I hope that would be a phenomenal thing. There's no getting away from edge. Our low latency applications, real-time data processing, it's shifting. We need to be closer to the end user. So edge, I think we're going to see more expansion. And then the hottest words at the moment, AI and machine learning, the possibilities are pretty much endless. And it's going to be amazing to see how that implements into future infrastructure.
I'm really looking forward to seeing it. I have to say, it's going to be an interesting period for us. Next, 2, 5, 10 years, whatever that looks like. It's going to be a fascinating journey. And when you think about all those things that you just mentioned, all those topics you just said, how do you see it affecting the people who are operating within it, or those people maybe that we're trying to attract to it? Is it a different skill landscape? Is it a different mindset?
I hope And definitely something that I've seen in the careers market. I've seen a lot more companies recruiting for ESG type roles, which is phenomenal. You know, we're really, really seeing that. How does it impact the actual workforce in total? I think it excites some and absolutely petrifies others, if I'm honest. I think there's the doom and gloom surrounding AI that it's going to kill off, you know, everybody's jobs and everything. And I think it's misinformed media and press, if I'm honest. I'm a firm believer that technology can be used in the best way to enhance everything that we need and make us work smarter, not harder. I don't think anything will ever replace human interaction and that need. If anything tells us that, how many times have you heard people moan about when they're trying to phone their bank and all they want to do is speak to a human and they're having to press one and do this? Like, yes, there will be an insurgence where people probably take AI and everything too far and remove that human interaction, but it will soon level itself out. It always does. So some petrified, some all for it, and hopefully we can find a happy middle ground where it does what we all want it to do.
Well, let me just say, it's been a real pleasure having you on the show today. I think we've managed to unpick a few of those hot topics, haven't we, around skills gap, diversity of thinking in our industry, women in tech, and you've given some great sound advice for, you know, those people who are thinking about joining our industry and our sector too. So thank you for taking the time today, Amy, to join us on the show.
No, thank you for having me, Mark. Really appreciate it.